You're in the place where mysteries and the missing meet, where conspiracies lurk around every corner. Welcome to the Deep, Dark Truth.
Welcome back to the Deep, Dark Truth. I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
And I'm Mikey.
And today we are talking about Project Pegasus. Unlike most of our conspiracy episodes, this conspiracy isn't a proven conspiracy taken from the CIA or the FBI vaults, but it is a very compelling case because a lot of it rings with the same vibe as other government experiments like Project Stargate / Grill Flame, which is an upcoming episode. It's also very interesting because of how educated the quote-unquote whistleblower is. And even if it ends up all being made up, it's a really fun, outlandish conspiracy that is not politically motivated in any way, which is getting rarer and rarer these days.
Can't relate.
Touche.
And of course, before we get started, we would like to thank today's sponsor, The Skin Store.
Today's episode is presented by The Skin Store. For over 20 years, The Skin Store has been the #1 destination for premium skincare, hair care, and beauty products. With over 8,000 different products from 300 different brands, The Skin Store has you covered for all your hair, cosmetics, supplements, and of course, skincare needs. Find your favorite brands like Ulta MD, NuFace, Olaplex, and more, all in one place with gifts with every purchase. Right now, The Skin Store is offering our listeners 20% off your next purchase by using the code POD. That's POD for 20% off your next purchase at skinstore.com/pod.list. Skin Store have the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Exclusions apply.
So before we get started, I just want to say that everything in this episode, as it is a unproven conspiracy, is obviously alleged. We will use the word alleged a lot, even more than we normally do. But in case I forget, here is the overarching caveat. Everything in this is alleged. Everybody that is accused of being a part of this program, it's all alleged. Just don't come for us.
If there's a single sentence that doesn't have the word allegedly in it, put allegedly in your heads.
Exactly. So Andrew Basiago is a lawyer in Washington State who claims that as a third grader in 1969 to 1970, spanning between the ages of 7 and 12, he was recruited into a classified DARPA operation called Project Pegasus, an operation that involved sending people to various points in history as observers, both physically and by using means of holographic projection. Then from 1980 to 84, he then claims that he was recruited into a second program by the CIA, which he calls the Mars Jump Room program. This was during his college years at UCLA, where he earned a BA in history. In total, he has 5 degrees, including a BA in history from UCLA, a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge, and more. So this is one of those cases where the credibility of the claimant makes it much more intriguing, like those of a very experienced special forces pilot seeing UFOs or, Kurt Russell seeing aliens.
The most reliable of sources.
The very pinnacle of sources, I would say.
There was a lot in that sentence to unpack.
There is.
What the fuck is DARPA?
So DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and it is a subset agency of the United States Department of Defense. So it's part of the DoD.
Got it.
So we're going to set this entire episode up with a softball question, which I know that Chip and Mikey are begging to ask right now, and that is, why was Andrew Basiago allegedly one of these chosen few people, especially being such a young age? And the answer for that is that at the time of Andy's childhood recruitment, his father, Raymond, was working for the Ralph M. Parsons Company as an engineer. And it is suspected / alleged that the Ralph M. Parsons Company was also working on this project. Now that company is called the Parsons Corporation, and they're a publicly traded company, and they're described as dealing with security, defense, intelligence, technology, and critical infrastructure. And we know from other unvaulted proven conspiracies that we've covered in the past, like MK Ultra, that the government oftentimes will collaborate with private labs, contractors, and organizations for some of these top secret programs. So not too strange of a allegation to make, I suppose.
Somehow not the strangest thing in all those sentences, and yet we've only just begun.
I mean, asking a third grader to be a part of a
So malleable.
mass project.
I mean, children are great to experiment on. I mean, what?
Allegedly, there were children used in other government programs like MK Ultra and other things. Obviously, we only have so much data and so much has been unvaulted for a lot of these programs, and MK Ultra in specific, which we've talked about and brought up many times in the past, they tried to burn all the paperwork. So it's one of those things of, we can't prove it, but it's really not that crazy. Crazier things have happened, especially during this period of time, during the Cold War.
If I recruited third graders, those would be the first papers that I would burn.
You're not wrong.
But also third graders that like work for your employees / your contractors, those aren't the children you get. You do a much more evil thing that involves people of color.
Like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment.
Yes.
So he claims that technology utilized during these government experiments had been developed by Nikola Tesla, which he calls a Tesla teleportation device. He claims that before Tesla's death, he had written plans for the device, which were found after he passed in January of 1943. In an interview with Coast to Coast AM, you should listen to that entire interview, by the way. It will be in our sources in the show notes. He had the following to say about it. Quote, "There were 2 teams of investigators that were rushing to his suite," meaning Tesla's, "at the Knickerbocker Hotel in Manhattan. 2 War Department agents and also 2 agents from the FBI. And the War Department agents got there first and seized Nikola Tesla's lab manuals. The papers of Nikola Tesla. Tesla's papers were never lost. My investigation over the last 10 years essentially proved that, in fact, they were forwarded to the individuals in the world who would make the most sense to forward Tesla's shop manuals to. The physicists that were then gathering in Los Alamos, New Mexico to build the atomic bomb." Unquote.
I love the image of, like, the FBI and the Department of Defense literally racing down the hallway, pushing each other out of the way to get the papers first.
It does. Like, the entire setup seems so comical, but when you think about all of the technological advancements that Nikola Tesla made, it really is not very far-fetched that the government would seize any of their scientific findings.
Absolutely.
In order to use them for governmental purposes.
But just shoving each other.
The thing about this is, as a whole, this entire conspiracy seems so outlandish, but when you pick apart a lot of these things, they're repeated in other unvaulted experiments. Like, for example, we know that the CIA... What do you mean CIA.gov is not working? I don't like that.
Oh no. They're here. The chickens have finally come for us. This was the breaking point.
So, for example, the Department of Defense also worked on Project Grill Flame. So we know that Project Grill Flame used psychics to spy on different hostages in different places. And we'll be getting into this in a future episode when we cover the Stargate project. One of the places that they were having these psychics look into, quote unquote, is giving them coordinates to places on Mars, on the moon. And so even if this wasn't real, but he thinks it was real because they did some type of mind experiment where they made him think that he was time traveling, or slipped him LSD in the case of MK Ultra, like that doesn't necessarily negate that there is an amount of truth to this.
Yeah, each bit is perfectly plausible on its own, but then when you add them up and try and say this happened, that's where it falls apart.
But again, we have to go back to, if somebody would have told me that they were, experimented on as a psychic and the CIA tried to get them to spy on the moon, I would also think that was crazy.
It's just that he says he succeeded. There's my sticking point.
As a part of Project Pegasus, he claims that he was able to view past events through what he calls a chronovisor, which was a holographic image showing past events, as well as teleporting to different places and events. Some of the historical moments that he claimed to witness while being part of the program, you should note that this is only a highlight reel, includes the following. Seeing Jesus' ministry, crucifixion, and resurrection on a chronovisor, being sent to Lincoln's assassination, the Gettysburg Address, and George Washington's time. He claims that they attempted to erase his memory when he left the program in 1972, putting needles in his spine that caused a headache as he talked about what he was experiencing in the program. So basically, as he went over everything that he had experienced, they had needles in his spine and they were shocking him or somehow injuring him in some way as he talked about it, which just reminds me of the weird room in Lost, but fine. He claims that he went to the year 2045 through a Stargate, which this will become interesting when we talk about Project Stargate in the future, where he was collecting information to give to U.S. intelligence. He also claims that Howard Hughes died in 2001 and not 1976, and that Howard Hughes was a consultant on the project. He even claimed that when he was sent to the year 2045, there were buildings made of emerald and tungsten, which sounds like the Emerald City from Wizard of Oz to me.
Seems very impractical.
The emeralds? I agree.
Well, it could have not been emerald, right? It could have been just like what he envisioned
said
to be emeralds.
It could have been jade. Does Child Him know the difference between emeralds and another green stone? We don't know. So at some point during one of these future trips, he allegedly was made aware that at some point between then and 2028, he either would become president or vice president of the United States. He was so convinced that he even ran in 2016 for president on a pretty damn progressive platform, honestly. In a less dark timeline, he probably even won. He even believes in Bigfoot, and he wants Sasquatches placed on the endangered species list. So, I guess we stan him, as a show.
Our official opinion as a political candidate
is that we stan. And there is honestly this fantastic article about his political platform that I will be linking in the show notes. It's amazing. Through reading the article, I found that he surprisingly wasn't the first presidential hopeful who was a believer. And after a brief mention in the article, I ended up going down this crazy rabbit hole in relation to Teddy Roosevelt. And it turns out that he was an avid believer in Sasquatch. He even mentioned it in his book called The Wilderness Hunter because he had heard this story from a native guide that he had these run-ins with Bigfoot. So anyways, it sent me down a crazy rabbit hole. Please go read the article.
Please don't shoot Sasquatch, Teddy Roosevelt.
While we're on the subject, there seems to be a mishmash of reigning theories about the time travel itself. At times, it seems proposed that the timelines themselves that he is allegedly visiting are alternate or possible timelines. If that is true, given the reasoning behind the program to learn the secrets of history and verify what the government knows about our past through observance, that kind of doesn't make sense because if something slightly changes in this alternate timeline, you're not going to be able to confirm absolutely anything.
You see, the types of time travel you use in your medium matter. If the picture in Back to the Future just has the people fading away, it's dumb.
So this brings us to his later years, where he alleges that he was then recruited into the Mars Jump Room program. As a participant in this second project, the CIA's Mars Jump Room program from 1980 to 1984, he says that he made about 40 trips to Mars via the Jump Room as a U.S. chrononaut.
That sounds exhausting.
It does sound exhausting. There were about between 8 and 10 people in his class specifically. I have seen reports of 8 other people or 8 including, so that's where the 8 to 10 comes from. But 2 other quote-unquote whistleblowers from his specific class have also come forward.
Now I'm listening.
Yeah, all 3 of these men, Andrew Basiago, William Stillings, and Bernard Mendez, have now met together in person to compare their stories since the third whistleblower, Bernard Mendez, came out.
You had my interest, but now you have my attention.
Interestingly, Bernard Mendez claims that he was part of another program in addition to this that had to do with extraterrestrial engagement or research under the Nixon administration, which is really interesting. But I was trying to verify it today, and it could be a matter of not having enough time to find something or there not being much to find. And either way, when you're dealing with secret government programs, there's not always like a Googleable answer for you.
Especially when they block you from viewing CIA.gov.
Especially then.
That better not get cut. You have to keep that.
So, in what appears to be unrelated, by the way, to Project Pegasus and the Mars Jump Room, there have been others that have also made claims of similar technologies allowing teleportation to Mars. I'm not going to get into all of them because even trying to get to the bare bones of Project Pegasus and the Mars Jump Room, that is enough. But there will, of course, be links in the show notes. Some of the claims associated with the Jump Room program are wild. And this one specifically, all three of those whistleblowers have said independently and agreed on. And that was that they believe Barack Obama was also recruited into this program as a child and was part of the program with them.
How old is Barack Obama? What year was he born?
He, at the time, would have been younger.
How did these people meet?
So basically, Andrew Basiago came out about his story.
And then they heard it and was like, oh, yeah, I was part of that.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because obviously there's like a bandwagon mentality that you have to be aware of. Obviously, just because you are intelligent, that doesn't mean you're not capable of creating like this massive hoax.
Correct.
Looking at you, Ben Carson.
In his accounts, when he talks about these things, he has very specific information. Like, my father worked for this company. It's in it was headquartered in this city at this address on this day. And I know it was this day because it was my ex birthday. Like, he has very specific information. And then later, when he was researching some of the information that he didn't know that he had to, put together, like, oh, we were at an Air Force base that was, near this city, but I've never heard of it. So it seems like these other two men have similar accounts that are very specific. The reason I think that they're probably at least a little independent from Andrew, aside from the fact that they don't seem to have actually known each other in their adult lives to corroborate before this, is that because Andrew seems to be such a highly learned, intelligent individual, if somebody was kind of like messing up my hoax story because they didn't actually know any answers to questions or like couldn't eloquently
you'd blast
speak,
them.
You would be like, no, like he's a faker. You know what I mean? Like, because if they mess up, that blows back on you. And then also people are going to assume you're lying and just completely discount you too.
Yes, totally. You watch too much Big Brother, by the way.
I mean, I do. I do.
That's all I got from that.
Mendez was the most recent whistleblower after the first two, Basiago and Stillings, were out and had named both President Obama as well as former DARPA head Regina Dugan. So here is a quote. Quote, he and Stillings claim that both Obama and Dugan were in their Mars training class at California's College of the Siskiyous in 1980, part of a group of 10 young adults chosen to travel to Mars via top-secret teleportation jump room. That was reported by NBC News. They also claimed that the 19-year-old at the time, Barack Obama, went by the name Barry Soetoro. The two former chrononauts also said that they encountered the future president at secret U.S. bases on Mars, which he is said to have visited twice between the years 1981 and 1983. On one instance, Basiago said he even exchanged words with Soetoro en route to the jump room, unquote. Amazingly, absolutely amazingly, the White House actually commented on all of this during the Obama administration.
Good for them. I have a sense of humor.
It never happens. You never hear of, okay. Recently you have heard of presidents commenting on very volatile, outlandish conspiracy theories, but that did not ever used to be the case.
Or ones you create yourself.
Or ones you create. You ain't wrong. You ain't wrong, boo.
Last 4 years are outliers and they should not be counted. Except they're not outliers. It was always like this.
During the Obama administration, Tommy Vidor, the spokesman for the National Security Council, told Danger Room, which is an outlet, quote, only if you count watching Marvin the Martian, unquote, in relation to whether or not Obama had been on Mars. It's just...
Only if you count doing ecstasy.
So he, totally outed Barack Obama as this old presidential man who watches Looney Tunes.
Yes, that was the
You're missing the important point here.
That is the important part. I'd be so pissed if I was Barack Obama. You told the whole world that I'm, into Looney Tunes?
Excuse you, he released a footage of his birth, and it was the Lion King opening. I forget which, he was doing a dinner at something, and so they're like, here's a clip from when I was born here proving I was in the United States. And it's Rafiki holding up Simba.
I love it.
And then I think he says, in case it's not clear, that was a joke.
Honestly, it was amazing. It was amazing. So you might wonder, what does this lawyer with 5 degrees stand to benefit? Unless it's just the infamy, right? So he's done a couple talks at different scientific conventions and different fringe conventions and conferences. But other than that, it's not like he's just getting crazy rich off of this. And he first started speaking out over 10 years ago. On ProjectMars.net's website, where he talks about the CIA jump room experiment, quote, I am leading the campaign to achieve political recognition of the fact that Mars is inhabited because we must now enact the international treaty that is required to protect the ecology and civilization of Mars from visitation, exploration, habitation, and colonization of human beings from Earth. We must remember that Mars does not belong to the people of Earth. Mars belongs to the Martians. If we fail to recognize this, then we fail our first major test of cosmic citizenship. I believe that the people of Earth are ready for cosmic citizenship, and I believe that they are ready for the truth. He also, on many occasions, have advocated for the release of documentation in relation to these 2 programs, saying that the teleportation technology that he witnessed as part of Project Pegasus could absolutely revolutionize the world, and he believes save the planet, which was also part of his presidential run. It was part of his platform was utilizing this technology and technology in general for a cleaner, better planet and a newfound, upgraded civilization.
I've come around. I love him. I don't care what drugs they injected into this poor child. He's the best.
Isn't it crazy interesting?
It's very interesting. No doubt about that.
Yes, my president.
Has there been any documentaries on Project Pegasus or the Mars Jump Room?
Documentary is a strong word.
So, not that I know of. He has appeared on, a lot of the mainstream, but still fringe media.
The mainstream fringe.
Like Coast to Coast AM, for example. It's very accessible. Lots of people listen to Coast AM that you wouldn't typically put them in the category of cryptid believer or paranormal believer or conspiracy theorist. They still listen to the show because they find it entertaining, even if they don't necessarily believe everything that is ever said on the show, which,
right.
I mean, nobody should ever believe anything that is said anywhere.
Except for our show.
On those words of wisdom, we're going to go to an ad break really quick. And we're back with more on Project Pegasus. So he has his own nonprofits as related to Project Pegasus and the Mars Jump Room.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, the Project Pegasus focuses on trying to achieve disclosure and trying to get the government to disclose their government projects and everything related to these two specific projects. So the mission statement at projectpegasus.net says the following. Project Pegasus is a quest began in 1968 by Andrew Basiago when he was serving as a child participant in the U.S. time-space exploration program, Project Pegasus. Project Pegasus was the classified defense-related research and development program under the Department of Advanced Research Projects Technology, DARPA, in which the U.S. defense technical community achieved time travel on behalf of the U.S. government, the real Philadelphia experiment. Project Pegasus was launched by the U.S. government to perform remote sensing in time so that reliable information about past and future events could be provided to the U.S. president, intelligence community, and military. It was expected that the 140 American school children secretly enrolled in Project Pegasus would continue to be involved in time travel when they grew up and go on to serve as America's first generation of chrononauts. The children found, however, that in the process of serving time as child time travelers attached to Project Pegasus, they became America's space-time pioneers. Andy was the first American child to teleport and one of America's early time-space explorers, as will be told in his soon-to-be-published book, which I believe has already been published since this mission statement was composed.
Yeah.
In 1968, he resolved to one day tell the true story of his experiences in Project Pegasus and reveal the world that the U.S. government had made a secret teleportation technology that, if made public, would revolutionize transportation across the face of our planet. Today, he serves as the team leader of the new Project Pegasus, the only group in the world that is lobbying the U.S. government to declassify its time travel secrets. Under Andy's leadership, the mission of today's Project Pegasus is to lead the campaign in law, politics, and culture to change the U.S. government to disclose its teleportation capability so that this revolutionary technology can be used to advantage humanity in the 21st century. Andy envisions a world in which teleports will replace airports for real-time transit between major transport hubs around the world, thereby making long-distance travel faster, easier, safer, and cheaper. The declassification and deployment of the U.S. government's teleportation capability may also be the most important environmental cause of our time, for it will prevent billions of tons of pollutants from conventional transport from entering the atmosphere every year. Unquote.
Jumping back a point or two, does he have claims about, like, meeting alien life? He's like, Mars belongs to the Martians. Are there Martians?
Okay, so he does claim that there are humanoids living on Mars and that he has seen them. However, I'm not sure if he claims that he's actually seen alive humanoids on Mars. So here is a quote from him that is from express.co.uk. Quote, I show that in a ravine west of the home plate in the Gusev crater on Mars, there was a mass grave of several hundred humanoid bodies, both male and female, clothed in uniform blue clothes suggestive of regemination. So I would urge objectified open-mindedness. It's a crazy concept to believe it's not just Earthlings who have been kidnapped here, abducted here on Mars. There may be children who have been enslaved here. The fact that there was a ravine full of bodies could have been an open-air cemetery, a place of ritual human sacrifice, or some genocide killing field, as has been in the pub domain now for 10 years, but has largely been ignored, I think because we are so easy to indulge in the giggle factor when these types of facts surface, unquote.
So he claims those were Martians, or?
So he claims that they were humanoid figures that didn't quite look like regular humans.
He's lost me again. All aliens are humanoid is very stupid.
And I do agree to a point. I think that if we were talking about a planet that was even more significantly less like our own, like if we were talking about Venus in its gaseous atmosphere, But a lot of prevailing theories is that Mars used to be like Earth. Mars used to have an atmosphere similar to Earth. There was water on Mars.
It does not favor upright bipedal monkeys.
That's not typically what I've read. I've read that Mars will soon become like Earth. That it is a younger version of Earth.
Who's a little baby Earth? Who's a baby Earth?
Well, if you think about it, the gravitational pull of the sun, we've talked about this several times. Mercury gets pulled into the sun, Venus comes closer to the sun, then its atmosphere gets blown away from solar flares and becomes Mercury, this dry rock. And then Earth becomes Venus because its greenhouse gases become so crazy that it can't sustain the temperatures and nothing survives. And then Mars moves into the Earth's area and the ice caps melt and becomes oceans and sustains life.
I can only say NASA's official stance is that they believe that several billion years ago, when the planets were formed, that Mars was similar to Earth. It had this same type of atmosphere and the surface had water on it. Whether or not it could become like Earth again or even be terraformed, if we're just going balls to the wall conspiracy, we could just terraform Mars like it's Firefly.
No. We will protect the natural ecology of Mars. We're not betraying Andrew Basiago's vision.
A second ago he lost you, and now you're all on board again and ready to fight me.
Only on his political views. I just refuse his humanoid shape. It is a very inefficient shape. Why would other planets also develop this shape?
So it's really hard to find the sourcing for this. And I'm sure it would take me days to find it. That, the actual original source and not people just repeating it.
Mm-hmm. God, I hate that.
Allegedly, Project Pegasus, there was mention at some point of use of microchips to track these time travelers. So the people that were actually time traveling versus just using the chronovisor were microchipped. There is a strange, kind of, sort of corroborating article that was released a while ago. There's actually quite a few articles on it, but one of them just so happened to have a little bit more information. And that was that a skull was found that was 9,000 years old, and a microchip was found inside of it in Mexico. So these underwater archaeologists that were studying the world's largest flooded cave system in Mexico discovered these 9,000-year-old human remains and different bones and animals of the Ice Age, and that these remains are found in this cave, which is called Sac Octun, in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo. They found this skull that allegedly had a microchip in it.
I'm suspicious.
And so it was just a strange thing that was completely unrelated in terms of it's never been presented here is some type of proof of Basiago's claims, but it was more I came across it independently while researching different microchip related things and found this very strange article. I too am suspicious, Chip. What lab is this microchip at?
I have lots of questions. It's just that this one says here's a physical thing, as opposed to Andrew who's here's all these stories. Where I'm you have great political opinions, I'm listening. With this, there's a chip to poke, as it were.
I'm just trying to find some type of chain of command for this microchip, alleged microchip.
Who has this, Mr. Scientist?
So these scuba divers were from the National Institute of Mexico Anthropology and History, and they said that they have no idea what happened to this microchip because Mexican Security Service was brought in to further do research and took this microchip. So they brought it back to the university to do this detailed study, and the university found it to be a microchip, and they were shocked, and they like contacted somebody or the Mexican security force found out about this, and they were then brought in for further research, and they took the microchip, and none of the divers seemed to know what happened to it.
Well, you lost me in the middle, but yep, that matches, that lines up.
Yeah, so, can't confirm, can't deny, no physical proof that is actually in somebody's hands right now. Nothing that anybody is saying proves or disproves Project Pegasus in any way. Just a strange related tangent side story that I found while researching this case.
That was a tiny glimpse into about 5 minutes in Mo's mind.
What are we feeling currently, aside from obviously Andrew Basiago for president? Aside from that.
I feel very strongly about this. I'm worried that there were drugs given to him as a child that did very bad things to his body. But hey, president.
I am also kind of on that train, like on the you were part of a government experiment train, but maybe not the one you think you were. I'm kind of there.
That's my strong feeling.
I also equally feel like 3 years ago, I would have heard about this case, been kind of intrigued, halfway through researching it, would have abandoned it and just been like, no, that's a solid no. But after everything we've learned about the CIA employing psychics and different government experiments and MK Ultra and drugging people against their will and the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and all of these different things, it really sets a precedent for some of these Cold War experiments that is so beyond what I would have thought 3 years ago.
The men who stare at goats.
At that point, nothing really shocks you. Anything is perfectly plausible given the range of evidence and proof that we have of some of the similar experiments during that similar time period. I mean, the credibility part of him being very intelligent and having multiple degrees and stuff like that makes you want to believe more into it and see more into it, but that doesn't always guarantee everything either.
No, that's bullshit to me, because Ben Carson exists. You can be very, very smart and good in one area and useless in every other area.
A lot of different cult leaders, highly intelligent or somewhat intelligent, very charismatic leaders. And so it's a kind of a double-edged sword. Like, you are smart enough to eloquently tell your story, which definitely makes it more interesting to listen to and to listen to him talk about it, for sure. It definitely makes the story more intriguing because it's a better story than it would be if he was someone else. There's that flip side of like highly intelligent people can also get away with a lot of things because they're highly intelligent and they can, craft a good tale. It just kind of comes down to what would be the benefit for him, because aside from like a little bit of notoriety within fringe communities like UFO communities and such, it doesn't seem like he's benefited much, even from like writing a book or like starting his nonprofit. Nonprofit means nonprofit. Like, he could pay himself X amount of a wage, but I doubt that people are just lining up to hand him their money for this nonprofit.
It also, like, I don't know, it poses the question of, there's so many theories out there about teleportation, time travel, all of those things. It's kind of like putting a seed in something will be in the future anyways. Like, to kind of create a legacy, like, oh, I was one of the first people to talk about this, when eventually it's coming. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, and there's also the idea that because so many people have said it, after a certain period of time, you keep hearing something and you're like, okay, at some point there has to be some truth to this, because 800 people and 200 ex-government officials or whatever the case may be have came forward about this specific kind of thing. And so there has to be some amount of truth to it as well, which I think fuels people's imaginations and fuels their desire to want to believe it or want to believe some of it.
That could be the same thing too about the past, even off the wall subjects like vampires. People having accounts of seeing vampires 5, 6, 7, 800 plus years ago. The more and more people talk about it, the more and more it becomes, and the more, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the more lore and like legend and mystery surround it. Although I will say, I just saw some people that claim to be vampires on TikTok the other day, and they seem to be doing fine. Had a whole Q&A about what it's like to be a vampire.
You be whatever you want to be.
In conclusion, we want to know what all of you think. Do you believe it?
I believe that Project Pegasus probably existed. I believe that we'll probably hear more about it maybe later in our lifetimes at some point in time, but it was probably not exactly what he is describing it to be, at least not in its entirety.
Oh, and time travel can't be real. Not in our universe, at least. But I'll go with the teleporting, that's all, yeah.
Chip has turned into a Debbie Downer.
I'm all about him.
You just want to vote for him. Not the same. You just want to save the Sasquatches.
I want to save Mars.
Let us know what you think. Believe it, don't believe it, sort of believe it. What team are you on? Let us know. Until next time, I'm Mo.
I'm Chip.
I'm Mikey.
Save the Bigfoot, save the world.
You just listened to the Deep Dark Truth Podcast. See you next time. And remember, your local cryptids want to meet you.
When you place a wager with William Hill Sportsbook, every sports moment becomes even more interesting. And we have a special 2021 offer to help you bet on all your favorite sports risk-free. Download the William Hill mobile app. And when you sign up, you can get started with a risk-free bet of up to $2,021. Use promo code RADIORF. Must be present in Virginia. 21 plus only. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call, text, or chat our confidential and toll-free helpline at 1-888-532-3500. Let's make it interesting with William Hill Sportsbook.